We pay our respects and acknowledge the traditional custodians, past, present, and emerging. Welcome to our 5 Women, 5 Day series in honour of International Women's Day 2021. I'm Sonia Bestulic, and I have the pleasure in this series to feature brief chats with Australian women writers. As you can see them here today, we have Jane Smith, Elizabeth Mary Cummings, Allison Paterson, and Diane Evans. And joining me on day 3 is author Jane Smith. Jane, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Now, you're welcome. Now, Jane is a Queensland author, a freelance book editor and librarian who writes about history, fiction and non-fiction for children and adults. Jane's latest time-travelling adventure series, Carly Mills' Pioneer Girl, celebrates the achievements of remarkable women through history. And Jane might remind us about a special month happening during this month before we kick on with the first question. Go for it, Jane.
It's not only International Women's Day this week, but it's Women's History Month. So it's a month where we just celebrate the achievements of women through history.
Wonderful. Now, tell us a bit about the Carly Mills Pioneer Girl series. What is it about and what's its purpose?
Well, it's a series for children, historical fiction series that features a little contemporary girl who goes back in time and has adventures with women who've changed the world. And I came up with the idea when I was writing another series that has a similar format, the Tommy Bell Bushranger Boy series, which is a little boy who goes back in time and has adventures with bushrangers. And one of the minor characters in one of those books was Carly Mills, who is a really strong, no-nonsense sort of country girl. And I liked her character and I thought it would be fun to give her a series of her own. So, and then the next question was, what sort of people would she have adventures with? And because of her character and her strength and that no-nonsense attitude, it just was a no-brainer that she should have adventures with strong women who change the world. So that's what the series is about, to celebrate those women.
Wonderful. Give us some examples of resilience of the historical women featured in the series and how their resilience and perseverance led to change.
Well, one of my favourites, I think, was in this book, which is the second one in the series, Emergency, and that features Dr. Lillian Cooper. She was Queensland's first female doctor, and she was just an incredible character, not just in what she did, but just in her personality. She studied medicine in England in a time when there was a university in London where women could study medicine, but they couldn't actually sit their final exams and qualify. So she had to go up to Scotland to qualify in medicine. And shortly after that, she emigrated to Australia with her lifelong companion, Jo Bedford. And they faced a bit of prejudice, both from the community and from the medical profession. But her way of dealing with that, I mean, I don't know how she felt about it, but it appears that the way she dealt with it was just to ignore it and just soldier on. And she achieved so much, and she was really committed. She was, by all accounts, quite blunt and even rude, and she was just such an unusual person. But by the end of her career, she was very well loved and very well respected, and she did a lot of advocacy for public health and for women and children in particular. So she was also an early adopter of motor cars and one of the founding members of the RACQ, and early member of the National Council of Women in Queensland. And she, in one of our earlier talks, Allison was talking about women in the services. She wanted to join up as a surgeon in the First World War and go to the front, and she was in her 50s at the time, but they wouldn't let her because women were supposed to serve better by staying at home and knitting. So that she didn't let that stop her. She joined the Scottish Women's Hospital, which was a women's unit, and went to Serbia and ended up getting a medal for her efforts. And then the next one, Superstar, which has just been released by Big Sky Publishing. That's
well done. Congratulations.
Thank you. And this one features Dane, Nelly, Melba, who was quite a remarkable person in a completely different way. She knew from early on she had musical talent and wanted to be an opera singer, but her father and husband just didn't think that was a fit career for a woman. It was just not respectable, and tried to stop her from having that career, but she just wouldn't give up. And she ended up, despite opposition from her father, going to Europe to study and becoming a huge hit, and becoming one of Australia's first major cultural exports. So two very different women and achieving in different fields, and not only for their own benefit, but Nelly Melba, was really well known for her charitable works and fundraising for the war effort, and for encouraging young aspiring musicians.
I love those examples, and they really strongly embody the whole theme of International Women's Day. They chose to challenge at a huge level, like huge.
So many, and challenging in so many different ways. Like Lillian Cooper, I should have mentioned, one of the things I loved about her, she also challenged the fashions, silly, nonsense fashions, and particularly corsets. She thought that women should not wear corsets. They were not healthful, and I'm grateful to her for that.
Yes, and she put some like medical evidence behind it too, which was fantastic. So I'm sure there are millions of women grateful for that.
Yeah.
So Jane, what do you hope readers will take away from reading this series?
Well, mostly I just hope that they enjoy them as an adventure series. So there's lots of action and adventure in them. But I do also hope that it shows kids a bit about what life used to be like, and what these women achieved and how they changed the world. Not so long ago, I did some talks at a children's school, and I asked the kids to put up their hands if they saw a female doctor, and I would say probably 3/4 of them put their hands up. And it's only, not much more than 100 years ago that there were none in Queensland. Well, Lillian was the second in Australia, and that was in 1891. So I thought that was an incredible change over a relatively short period of time. And also ask these kids if these things surprised them. When I told them that women used to not be allowed to vote or couldn't have certain careers, and it did surprise them. And I thought that was actually quite heartening, because now they just take it for granted that there should be equality in these things.
Absolutely. Kids do teach us a lot by their responses and their thoughts on what used to go on in the past, and they've got a lot to contribute about what's to go on in the future. So interesting times ahead. So Jane, tell us who you admire or have been inspired by when you think of a woman or women.
Well, I mean, it's I think I made it obvious. I'm quite inspired by Lillian Cooper, and I grew up in Brisbane too, so that was a particular interest to me. But also I had read lots of books and biographies of women in my research for doing this series, so I could pick out some interesting ones. And Miles Franklin really stood out for me, as also being interested in writing myself, but just in all that she did for women's suffrage and improving women's rights and conditions in the workplace, and in her support for other artists. She was just a really humble and ambitious woman, but ambitious not for personal gain so much as just for the world and for other people.
Fantastic. Jane Smith, thank you so much for sharing in the 5 Women 5 Days series.